I've been trying to call. I've been on my own for long enough. Maybe you can show me how to love. Maybe I'm going through withdrawals. You don't even have to do too much. You can turn it on with just a touch, baby. I look around and since it's cold and empty, no one's around to judge me. I can't see clearly when you're gone. And I said, ooh, I'm blinded by the lights. No, I can't sleep right until I feel your heart touch. I said, ooh, I'm drowning in the night. Oh, when I'm like this, you're the one I trust. Cause I can see the sun light up the sky. So I hit the road and overdrive, baby. Hit the road and overdrive. The city's cold and empty. No one's around to judge me. I can't see clearly when you're gone. And I said, ooh, I'm blinded by the lights. No, I can't sleep until I feel your heart touch. I said, ooh, I'm drowning in the night. Oh, when I'm like this, you're the one I trust. I'm coming back to let you know I can never say it on the phone. But when I let it go this time, I said, ooh, I'm blinded by the lights. No, I can't sleep until I feel your touch. Feel free to be whoever you want to be. Feel free to dance, feel free to sing, just feel free. Feels like the world is picking on ya. Feels like it's picking on me. But trying to please everybody, that ain't no way to be.
All right, welcome to episode 75 of the Two Tone Talk podcast. And I have got a little bit of a cold, so I may sound a little bit rough today. Been iced in all week, like I'm sure many of you have. Actually, today is the first day this week that I've been able to actually get out of the house and drive around. Roads have been totally iced over. I live in the South. We're not used to dealing with these type of weather events. So, been in the house all week. And finally got out a little bit today. But it's the Two Tone Talk podcast. It is episode 75 as the playoffs roll on. and the Titans' search for a new head coach rolls on. Interviews being had left and right. Still a couple more interviews that need to be held. And I made it clear on Monday's episode who I want. Any one of these three guys I would be thrilled with. Those three guys being Bobby Slowick, Ben Johnson, or Brian Callahan. I would be thrilled with any of those three guys. If the Titans hire any of those three guys, I would be ecstatic. I think they're the best choice for where the Titans are. You could talk me into Mike Macdonald or Frank Smith. I realize the Titans' name has been attached to Aaron Glenn, defensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions, who they have yet to interview. Their name has been attached to him, some rumors. I know he's a respected coach, and I'm not saying that he won't make a good head coach someday in this league, maybe even next year, but I don't think that he's the guy for the Tennessee Titans. A defensive mind reminds me a lot of Vrabel, and to me, if you're going to hire him, you may as well have just kept Vrabel. But, that's somebody, Dan Quinn. Obviously, the Titans interviewed Dan Quinn this week. I think Dan Quinn does deserve another shot. He coached the Atlanta Falcons to a Super Bowl. He has done a good job as a defensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys for the past few years, in spite of what happened on Sunday. That was a bad performance, but overall, he has done a good job as the defensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys the past few years, and I think he does deserve another shot to coach somewhere. But again, I don't think Dan Quinn is the right fit for the Tennessee Titans. Again, defensive guy, and we've had our fair share of defensive guys. Our offense has been abysmal. That's why I want Ben Johnson. That's why I want Bobby Slowick. That's why I want Brian Callahan. Those are the guys I want. And I will tell you this, Frank Smith, the reason you could talk me into him, at least he's an offensive guy. He's the offensive coordinator for the Miami Dolphins. You could talk me into him. And the only reason you could talk me into Mike Macdonald, who is the defensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens, is because I think he is at least he's not from a bygone era of run first, kind of offense. I think he would at least be smart enough to put somebody in charge. He knows what works and what doesn't. So you could talk me into Macdonald. You could talk me into Frank Smith. I'm not willing right now to be talked into Aaron Glenn. I'm not willing to be talked into Dan Quinn. There have been some other the offensive coordinator for somebody have to explain this to me. We interviewed the offensive coordinator for the Carolina Panthers to come in and be the head coach. Now I don't know Thomas Brown. I don't know why we even bothered, but you got to keep in mind with these head coaching interviews, sometimes they're looking for guys who might come in and be coordinators, who could be position coaches. So maybe that's what they're thinking. I don't know. But after this year, I don't want anything to do with anybody associated with the Carolina Panthers. Okay. I think the only guys the Titans have left to interview are the Lions coaches, Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. And, they put in a request to interview David Shaw, former coach for Stanford. Now, that interview screams to me, we want this guy to come in and be a coordinator. We want this guy to come in and be a position coach. Now, speaking of position coaches, a ghost from the Titans' past has reemerged by the name of Mike Munchak. Remember Mike Munchak? Former player for the Houston Oilers, former O-line coach, and former head coach of the Tennessee Titans during some very dark years, if you recall. And he has stated he would like to come back and coach the offensive line. Sounds good to me. because our offensive line has been horrible. And while I do think a lot of it has to do with the talent, a lot of it has to do with the roster, I also think the O-line coach probably need to go. And I would love to have Mike Munchak come in and coach the offensive line. I think that would be great. So, there you go. Just Quan9 in the chat says the Panthers OC, from what I heard, is connected to Sean McVay. He wasn't running his offense in Carolina. So some people believe the reason for the Panthers' woes are not necessarily because of their OC. I don't know a lot about what's going on in Carolina. I just know it's kind of a dumpster fire right now. They don't have a first-round pick. They need a new head coach. They need a lot of new things. Soul Snatcher in the chat says all they see when they look at Dan Quinn is 28-3. I agree. But yeah, Titans head coaching interviews continue. I've made it clear where I stand, who I want, who I don't really care for. And we'll see. Obviously, they had their interview with Bobby Slowick, offensive coordinator for Houston. They had that last night, and that's been an interview that a lot of people have been waiting on. So, and Brian Callahan, one of those guys that I really want, he is the first coach that we know of to actually get a second interview with the Titans. He's the only coach that we've heard of that they've interviewed who got called back for a second interview. So that might be a good sign that they're really zeroing in on Brian Callahan to be the new head coach. That would be great. That would be great. I like him a lot. He's probably grown on me the most of any of the coaches that we've got kind of that we're interviewing here. Callahan has really grown on me. In just kind of researching him, learning about him. I was already high on Ben Johnson. I was already high on Bobby Slowick. But Brian Callahan has really emerged to me as a guy I'd really like to see be brought in as a head coach. B Ravens 1 brought it up, so we'll talk about it. Mike Vrabel has started to get brought in. Boy, that didn't seem like proper English. He started to be brought in. He has begun his process of interviewing to be a head coach somewhere else. He had an interview yesterday with the LA Chargers, like an in-person interview, and he has also had some interest from the Atlanta Falcons and the Seattle Seahawks. So this is interesting. I think personally that Vrabel, his best option to me, because I've said, you know, it's kind of turned in for the last week. It feels like I'm anti-Vrabel. No, I think Vrabel's a good coach. I think I've made it clear. I think he deserves a shot somewhere else. I don't think the Titans are the right situation for him. I think they were the right situation for him when he got here. But what my biggest complaint about Vrabel is I felt like we didn't do a good job developing players. I look at guys like Treylon Burks. I look at Chigo Okonkwo, who regressed this year for the most part. I look at certain other guys on both sides of the ball, and I say, hey, who's gotten better? And I asked that question during the season. Who has gotten better on this team from one year to the next? I'm not talking about, you know, guys like Derrick Henry. Like, we're not talking about that. I'm talking about guys that have been drafted by the Titans. And you know, opinions vary. Some people think that they were just bad draft picks and there was not much you could do. Some people think, you know, maybe with a better staff, these players could have developed more. I don't know. When I see Kyle Phillips, who had a stretch this year where he was playing better in the Steelers game, he had some big plays. In the Tampa Bay game, he had some big plays. And then all of a sudden, he's just a healthy scratch the rest of the way, then I got to wonder what we're doing. Why are we not at least seeing what we got in this guy? So, I mean, my biggest complaint about Vrabel was struggling to develop players, stagnant, conservative, boring offense. But I think the Chargers are absolutely the best fit for him because the Chargers, they've already got a franchise quarterback in Justin Herbert. They've got a ton of talent on that team. I mean, this season was viewed as a huge disappointment for the Chargers because a lot of people thought the Chargers were going to be good because you look at their roster and it's like, dang, they got a good roster. They've got good weapons on the outside. They've got Austin Eckler. Like, they've got some good stuff, and that's why a lot of people were surprised at how bad the Chargers were this year. So when I look at Vrabel, you look at what he did in Nashville. When he showed up in Nashville in 2018, the Titans already had some good pieces in place. Derrick Henry was already on the roster, right? Jarrell Casey was around. I think Harold Landry was already here. You had a half-decent receiver on the outside in Corey Davis. There were some nice pieces. And then I think John Robinson got insanely lucky with the 2019 draft. I have to say it was luck because you look at every draft John Robinson had after that, and it was horrible. John Robinson 2020 through 2022, three horrible drafts in a row. 2023 was last year, and we already had Rand by then. But 3 horrible drafts in a row by John Robinson, and that tells me that he just got insanely lucky in 2019 to draft Jeff Simmons, A.J. Brown, David Long, all of those guys in one draft. Just an insanely, even a broken clock is right twice a day, right? And so I think you mix in a lucky draft with some of the talent that Tennessee already had when Vrabel got here, and then you look at 2019, and well, lest we forget, 2019, that miracle year that we like to talk about where we went to the AFC Championship, the Titans were 2-4, and it looked like they were completely hopeless before a quarterback change to Ryan Tannehill saved the day. And then Derrick Henry was just an absolute monster. Okay, like, he was already on his heels, that 2019 year Vrabel was, before a quarterback change just brought life to the team. Then you had some good years in 2020. I mean, it was a good roster in 2020 and in 2021. But over the years, there comes a time where you can't keep everybody from one year to the next. It is a business with cap space and finances. You can't keep everyone. You've got to draft good players and develop those players. And I feel like over the years, that's part of the reason why we've seen this roster just get worse and worse and worse as the years go by. Because I don't think, we were developing players the way we should. I don't think we sure weren't drafting good players or good enough players. And so I think the Chargers would be a good fit for Vrabel initially because they've got Justin Herbert, who's just waiting to, I think, explode onto the scene and be on the level of some of these other great young quarterbacks that we see. The only thing is, I don't know if Vrabel strikes me as very much of a Los Angeles kind of guy. You know, I don't look at him and think like, man, Los Angeles, California, that is Mike Vrabel. But the Chargers are I'm not going to say they're a small market team, obviously, but they don't get a lot of attention. They don't get a lot of media attention. So in that sense, it's a good fit for Vrabel as well. I mean, you heard me last week. I said this is why Vrabel would be a terrible coach for a team like Dallas or Philadelphia, because those teams are always in the media. Those teams are always at the forefront, and Vrabel doesn't do well with that. So the Chargers, again, would be a good fit for him because the Chargers are low-key. You know, they're kind of overshadowed by Kansas City in that division. You've got the Raiders there, who are a big name, that are, Sean Payton and the Broncos. So it may very well be that the Chargers are the fit for Mike Vrabel. But, I mean, I think the Seahawks strike me as a kind of a place Vrabel could thrive too, although they're not in as good of a position quarterback-wise. I mean, they have Geno Smith, who's played well, but how long can you go with Geno? And the idea of Mike Vrabel coaching DK Metcalf, I mean, that seems like something else right there. And then Atlanta has shown interest in Vrabel. I think Atlanta is all. I mean, I think everybody is expecting them to hire Bill Belichick, but I don't think Atlanta would be a good fit for Vrabel because of the quarterback situation. Their roster currently probably not quite as good. I think the Falcons are kind of at the same level as the Titans right now. So, but Vrabel is getting interest, and I'm sure you might see his name attached to the Commanders at some point. I think that you could see his name attached to the Panthers. I mean, every team might at least bring him in for an interview, and rightfully so. But Vrabel has finally, after kind of a week of silence, he is now getting some interviews around the league, and we'll see where Vrabel lands. We'll see who the Titans end up with. I made my predictions on Twitter yesterday as to where I currently think everybody will land. I think the Commanders will end up with Ben Johnson. I think Johnson will end up there. They just made a huge hire at GM. I think, I've heard a lot of Washington and Ben Johnson and their names kind of attached to each other. At the end of the day, I think the Commanders will land Ben Johnson. I think that the Raiders, kind of an obvious choice. I think they'll stick with Antonio Pierce. That's who their players want. He's done a good job as the interim coach with a lot of uncertainty at quarterback. So I think the Raiders will take Antonio Pierce. I think the Falcons will take Bill Belichick. A lot of people seem to think that's what's going to happen. Bobby Slowick's an interesting one. I ended up saying I think Bobby Slowick goes to Seattle just as a wild card because I don't think, for whatever reason, a lot of people think Seattle's going to take Dan Quinn. I don't think they are. I think they may have soured on Dan Quinn after that game the other day, and I think Quinn might want to hold on in Dallas. I know Dallas has said they're keeping Mike McCarthy to be their head coach going into next year, but I mean, if McCarthy has another bad year, Dan Quinn could be the next guy up to coach the Cowboys. So there's merit for Dan Quinn in staying in Dallas for another year as a defensive coordinator. Let me get a sip of my drink. So I'm going with the pick that not a lot of people are saying. I'm going to say Bobby Slowick to Seattle. As far as Carolina, I mean, they're the most unappealing coaching job. I think I said maybe Mike McDonald could go to Carolina. It's not a very appealing job right now. Not a great roster. No first-round pick this year. Going to be tough. I think the Chargers will land Vrabel. And I think the Titans will land Brian Callahan. And I think that's how it'll shake out. As of right now, but if my playoff picks have been any indication, none of what I just said is correct. So, just keep that in mind. I want to talk about bussing with the boys the other day. And also, I mean, people are talking about Jim Harbaugh, too. Harbaugh has interviewed for the Chargers. That's interesting. Harbaugh has interviewed for a couple of teams. The Falcons interviewed Harbaugh. Where does he factor into all of this? That's a good question, too. So, bussing with the boys, the podcast with Taylor Lewan and Will Compton. They had Derrick Henry on Tuesday. And a lot of Titans fans were eager to hear this episode. Because this was Derrick's first interview, since the season ended. A lot of questions surrounding him and where he ends up next year. Is his time in Tennessee over? How does he feel about Vrabel and everything that happened? And I gotta say, this interview that he did with Lewan and Compton on the bus, it was about what I expected in terms of what he said about Vrabel, which was, he said he's a good coach. I was shocked that he got fired. Maybe the front office has a different vision going forward. And that was pretty much all he said about Vrabel. And that's pretty much what I expected. I mean, he's not going to go on there and say, this is the stupidest, thing I've ever heard of, or this is a great decision. He's not going to do that. But he said what I expected him to say. He said that Vrabel's a leader of men. Y'all already know how I feel about that phrase if I never hear it again. Some of these phrases that the Titans have used over the years to justify how terrible their offense is, I just, ironically, I find it offensive. Like, we're putting up 13 points a game, but it's okay. Our coach is a leader of men. I said it before. This ain't a construction site. This is a football team. Like, at the end of the day, you're getting paid to win games, not just be a leader of men. This ain't summer camp. This is the NFL. So being a leader of men, yeah, that's great. That's a great attribute to have as a head coach of an NFL team. But, like, everybody just acts like that's a justifiable reason as to why this guy, I mean, every one of these guys is a leader of men. Like, you can't be a head coach in the NFL if you are not a leader of men to some degree. I have no idea why people act like that is a justifiable reason to keep somebody on your staff, heading up your staff, who's coaching an offense who repeatedly struggles to even get 20 points in a game. A leader of men. What? Great. He's a leader of men. He's a leader of men. I'd like for him to be a leader of wins. Being a leader of men is great, but what about a leader of wins? That's what I'd like to see. But he talked about he's a leader, but you want to know another term that the Titans have used in the past to justify their terrible offense? You remember exotic smash mouth? They tried to make that a thing. They had t-shirts made, exotic smash mouth. The stupidest thing. I hated it at the time. I still hate it today. There is no such thing as exotic smash mouth. And there's nothing wrong with being smash mouth. But we all know what you mean when you say exotic smash mouth. It means you want to play old school 1975 football and try to make it cool. I'm sorry. It may be physical. It may leave the other team with a few bruises after they play you. But is it winning games? I am sick of exotic smash mouth. I am sick of leader of men. I want whatever wins. Whatever wins. Whatever causes us to have more points at the end of the game than the other team. I don't really care. Just, you call it exotic smash mouth, call it yada, yada, yada. I don't care what you call it. But I don't care if you're a leader of men. I don't care if you cower in the corner. If we're winning games, you're good. That's all I care about. That's literally all I care about is winning games. Of course I care about the well-being of the players. Of course I care about these guys and support them, all that. But, like, when it comes to the game, other than wanting these guys to be safe, man, I want to win games. You can be a leader of men all you want to, but when you're 6-11, don't nobody care. Unless you're Vrabel, and then the media will just praise you no matter what you do because you're a leader of men. Yeah, we know they've been horrible for 2 years, and they were probably going to be horrible again, and none of us were going to even care about their existence, but it's okay. He's a leader of men. They never win games, but he's a leader of men. Exotic smash mouth. God, I didn't mean to go off on that tangent today, but here we are. Let me get a sip of my drink. Bussing with the boys. That's what I was talking about. Derrick Henry. I will say this. The part of the podcast that really caused a lot of reflection, hearing Derrick and Taylor Lewan, for that matter, talk about the 2 years, 2019 and 2021. I know in 2020 they won their division, but I mean they talked about it on that podcast too, but it was like, 2019 and 2021, those 2 seasons, like, that was their chance. And Derrick said, he was like, we could have done it. Like, those teams in 2019, they got to the AFC title game. 2021, won their division, number 1 seed in the AFC. bye week, all that. To hear Derrick talk about it, man, it was a gut punch. Because Derrick pretty much said, like, that was it. Like, we literally, we had it. We had it. We had the team. We had, the camaraderie. We had, in 2021, we had the number 1 seed. Like, we just knew, like, we had something special, and then we blew it. Like, that's essentially what he said. We had the team to take it all the way, and we blew it. Man, it was tough. It was tough to listen because you could just hear, you could hear the regret, I think, because it was like, man, we really had 3 great opportunities in a row where we were in the playoffs. 2 of those opportunities, we were hosting playoff games, number 1 seed, and we just couldn't get it done. We had it all right there, and we blew it. And look at what happened after they blew it. Like, the whole thing comes unraveled. AJ's gone. Next thing you know, Byard's gone. Next thing you know, this guy, that guy, David Long, they're gone. Next thing you know, Tannehill's benched. Next thing you know, Derrick's gone. Next thing you know, Vrabel's gone. Like, it completely comes unraveled after that. Life comes at you fast in the NFL. And so that was a gut punch to listen to them reflect on what could have been. There's an old country song that says, from the 90s that says, we'll try not to think about what might have been. That could have, I said it in 2021. I said it after that season. That was our chance. Can I depress you real quick? 2021, that was our golden opportunity. We had it right there. Right there. Home playoff game. Had the ball. Tie game, driving down the field to kick a field goal to win it. Tannehill throws his 3rd interception, and it's over. I don't think I'll ever get over it. I've talked about it before. Never, like, I'm usually okay at separating, like, hey, it's just a game. Football game, there ain't nothing I can do about it. I'm not on the team. Like, I'm usually pretty good at letting stuff go maybe a day or 2 later. That one, though, that was the hardest loss as a fan I think I've ever experienced, was that Bengals game and that playoff game. That was, losing to the Chiefs in that AFC title game sucked, but it was like, you know what, like, we were the 6th seed. We were the lowest seed in the playoffs. What a run. Like, I was still encouraged. I was proud after that 2019 losing in the AFC title game. It's like, man, what a great season. 2021, though, it just felt like there was so much left on the table. Like, it didn't feel like the Titans should have been done after that, and they were. It was just awful. Awful. Terrible feeling. Still to this day, just eats me up when I see reruns of it, especially since it's divisional weekend and everybody shares the clips from that weekend of, like, the greatest day, the greatest weekend of divisional football ever was this week, and one of the parts why is the Bengals beating the Titans at the end of the game. And it's like, oh, just punch me in the face, why don't you? That would feel better. So yeah, hearing them talk about that, obviously, Derrick, obviously he doesn't know what he's doing next. He said he does not have any intentions on retiring. He has no intentions of calling it. He wants to play many more years. Of course he does. He's 30. I don't think I would have been shocked if he would have been like, well, I'm about to wind it down. He's a freak. So, he's going to keep playing, and he wants to win a Super Bowl, and of course he does. So I don't know. I think he did allude to the fact that he was almost traded, that he was very close to being traded by the deadline, and then it didn't go through. He said he was almost traded to a team that is still in the playoffs now. So, I'm thinking that's Baltimore. Or maybe Buffalo, but I don't know when they filmed it. So I guess that still could have been Dallas, maybe when they filmed that. But Um, yeah, I don't know where he's going to end up. Said he was almost traded. And he also, very interesting, he talked about the fact that coming into this season, the Titans locker room just felt very different. You know, it just felt like a lot of new people, and I could sense that all along. Like, man, this is a new team. And it was a weird dynamic when you look back on it because there were a lot of new players, a lot of new guys, but then you still had Tannehill and Henry and Byard and Simmons. You still had some of those pieces to kind of pull from the old days. Um, yeah, I there are a lot of people wondering if Derrick's going to be back in Nashville. I would be very surprised. I just don't think he will be. I think he'll be somewhere else next year. I don't know where. I don't have any. I mean, you know how free agency is. There's no telling where he will end up. I hope it's somewhere in the NFC. Um, Maybe wherever Vrabel goes and coaches, he'll take him. But I realize there's a lot of people who don't want to see him go somewhere else. But at the same time, like I guess I've already just dealt with it. It's like he's gone. To me, his time. I mean, I said it a couple weeks ago after that Jags game. That was a good send off for him. That was 170 yards, a touchdown, broke off a big run to kind of set him up for the big score late. Gave a nice speech afterwards in the stadium. Was just amazing in his press conferences and signing autographs and taking pictures. That felt like a good ending for him. The only ending that would have been better would have been like winning a Super Bowl. You know, but I think that was the best ending for him. And I don't think, you know, I think it's a new day in Tennessee. I think with the exception of a couple guys like Jeffrey Simmons and Harold Landry, I think it's just time to move on to a new era, which can be scary because, like, what if it's a worse era, you know? But you have to do it. You have to move on. You have to, new head coach, new stadium coming soon. You know, you can't stay stuck in the past too long. And so I think bringing him back would just be us saying, we're going to keep trying to do what we've done when everything else they're doing is saying we're moving on. We're moving this organization along. We're going to a new day, a lot of cap space, top 10 draft pick. We're moving on. So I think Derrick's done. I did enjoy his interview on Bussin' with the Boys. Thought he was open, honest. Talked about Kevin Byard and how tough that was with him being traded. And there you go. Speaking of Kevin Byard being traded, can we talk about the Eagles real quick? Whoa. I mean, I guess they're keeping Sirianni. Bro, I could have never predicted the falling apart of the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, they were 10-1 at one point. 10-1. They lost 6 of their last 7 games. I mean, I can't believe. Just what a complete disaster. Now you got people questioning Jalen Hurts. You got people questioning the coach. You got Jason Kelce retiring. AJ doesn't seem to care anymore. And let me tell you something. I posted on Twitter as a joke, and people actually started talking about it. Hey, if AJ demands a trade and wants to go somewhere else, hey, bring him on home. Bring the prodigal son home. What I say. Can't believe how awful, what an awful ending to the season for the Eagles. Just a total melt. They were dominated from start to finish by Tampa Bay. And so we look ahead to divisional weekend. We started with 32 teams, then we went down to 14, and now we're down to 8. And it all gets started on Saturday with the Houston Texans and the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens, now listen, Ravens are the 1 seed. They have repeatedly looked like the best team in the NFL. this year. This game eerily reminds me of 2019. The Ravens were 14-2. Lamar was the MVP. Everybody was going nuts about the Ravens. They had the week off, and then the divisional round rolled around, and the 6th seed, the lowly Tennessee Titans, came to town and dominated the Ravens. This feels a lot like that. The Ravens have essentially had 2 weeks off because they had the bye, and then before that, they rested all of their starters in Week 18 against Pittsburgh. So a lot of these starters have had 2 weeks. There's rumors of them getting their tight end Mark Andrews back. This feels a lot like a letdown game for the Ravens because the Texans, I want the Texans to lose. I don't want anybody in the AFC South to have any success at all. I want Houston to lose. And at the end of the day, I think they're going to play Baltimore tough. I think they're going to play them well. I'm going with the Ravens because I think Lamar was on that 2019 team that got let down by the Titans. John Harbaugh was there. Mark Andrews was there. And surely those guys are going to make it clear, don't let this happen to us again. Do not let this happen to us again. This is CJ Stroud's first road game in the playoffs. I don't expect that that's going to be too big of an issue for him because he's been great, most every step of the way. I think he's going to play Baltimore tough. I think this is going to be a close, tough game. I'm going to say the Ravens hit a field goal late with Justin Tucker to win this one. Barely. Going with Ravens over Texans, but I'm worried about these. I'm rooting for the Ravens. Okay. I do not want to see Houston or CJ Stroud succeed. I'm already prepared going into next year. Everybody is going to be falling all over themselves to talk about how great Houston's going to be with CJ Stroud, just like they were falling all over themselves to talk about how great Jacksonville was going to be this year with Trevor Lawrence. I already know. So let's just end it right now. I hate the Ravens, but I'm going to root for the Ravens as well. Saturday night, it's the Packers and the 49ers, and the 49ers better come ready too. Teams like the Texans and the Packers, these super underdog teams, man, they're playing with house money. They're coming in here knowing nobody thinks they're going to win. They're going to come in there and try to play spoiler. In Green Bay, with the way they looked against Dallas, listen, I think the 49ers are better than the Cowboys. They are, infinitely. Maybe not infinitely, but they are much better than the Cowboys. And it's in San Francisco, just like the Dallas game was in Dallas, but I think this is going to be a tougher test for Jordan Love and the Packers. But the 49ers better come ready. I'm telling you. I'm going with the 49ers to win this game, but just like the Ravens, man, these 49ers, they better show up ready. Because Jordan Love, if he plays like he did against Dallas, you got trouble brewing. All right, Sunday. The other NFC matchup. It is the Bucs and the Lions. This is the kind of chaotic NFC matchup I love right here. Tampa Bay and Detroit. Kudos to Tampa Bay for getting to this point, because most people thought Tampa Bay was going to be like a top 5 draft pick team. I mean, people expected them to be terrible. And look at them. I mean, they just dominated the other day. Now they go on the road to Detroit. Detroit's feeling good. They just got their first playoff win in 32 years at home. I think this game's going to be... This game just has a lot of chaotic energy to it. I feel like this is going to be one of those games where just a bunch of crazy stuff happens. I'm talking like kickoff returns, trick plays, crazy penalties. Like, I just feel like this game's going to be nuts. I'm going with Detroit. I'm behind Detroit, man. They're the feel-good story. I'm going with the Lions over the Bucs. And like I said, I think it's just going to be a wild game. These two teams, I just feel like there's going to be some craziness. And then Sunday night, this is the one everybody's looking forward to. The Chiefs and the Bills, they meet again. And every time the Chiefs and the Bills play each other, I feel like it's always in Kansas City. They always play at Arrowhead. Well, not this time. This time they're playing in Buffalo. And I feel like those fans in Buffalo are ready to unleash all sorts of vengeance on Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs for what they have put them through over the years. I feel like those Bills fans are going to show up for this game, and they are going to be loud. They're going to be jumping through tables like they're Jeff Hardy. They're going to be setting themselves on fire. They're going to be pouring beer all over themselves. They're going to be losing their minds. I got to go with the Bills. I feel like what is coming to the Chiefs Sunday night is a long time coming for Buffalo. Like I said, I feel like every time they play the Chiefs, it's always at Kansas City. It's always at Arrowhead. This one's in Buffalo. And again, can we talk about how important it was for Buffalo to come back and win their division? Because now they get to play Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs at home instead of going on the road. Going with the Bills. And if a game this weekend is going to be kind of lopsided, I think it's going to be this one. I could see the Bills beating up on the Chiefs. Just because I think this Bills, I think Buffalo and their fans, they're going to be rabid Sunday night. I think they're going to be absolutely out of their minds. So I'm going to say Bills. So I got Ravens. I'm hesitant. I'm worried about the Ravens. But I got Ravens over the Texans. I got 49ers over the Packers, and I'm worried about them too. I've got Lions over the Bucs. I've got Bills over the Chiefs. And I'll be back Monday to talk over all of it with you. And we are nearing the Titans hiring a new head coach. I mean, they've only got a couple people left to interview, but I mean, this is a much more slow-going process. Everybody's taking their time. I get it. Here we go. This has been episode 75 of the Two Tone Talk podcast. I appreciate all you guys tuning in. You guys are amazing. I appreciate you. Don't forget to sub on YouTube, follow me on Twitter.
Feel free to be.
That would be great. Bye.